The old man's hand rose slowly into the cool morning air. The gesture was simple, quiet, almost fragile, but it was always there, every single morning. And on that October day, as the motorcycle roared past Maplewood Road at exactly 7:15 a.m., the old man stood beside his white wooden mailbox, lifted his thin arm, and gave the same small wave he had given hundreds of times before. The biker nodded back. Neither of them said a word. They never had. Yet somehow, the moment mattered, more than either of them had ever expected. But one morning soon, that hand would not rise, and when it didn't, everything would change. Before we continue, tell us something in the comments. Where are you watching from today? Many of the people listening to these stories have lived long lives in many towns and many countries. It's always wonderful to see where this brotherhood of listeners gathers from. Now let's return to Maplewood Road. Maplewood was the kind of place people rarely noticed on a map. A quiet stretch of road outside a small Midwestern town, lined with old oak trees and modest houses that had stood for decades. Some of the homes had peeling paint. Others had carefully kept gardens. Most belonged to people who had lived there most of their lives. The mornings there were peaceful, a few pickup trucks heading toward town, a school bus rumbling past at 8, the distant bark of a dog behind a fence. And every morning, at exactly 7:15, the deep thunder of a motorcycle rolling down the road. The man riding that motorcycle was Marcus Steele Alvarez. Marcus was a large man with broad shoulders and a beard that had begun to show threads of gray. His black Harley-Davidson had carried him along that same road for years on his way to the Iron Riders Motorcycle Club garage on the other side of town. He liked Maplewood Road. It was quiet, calm, a few minutes of open road before the day began. And 2 years earlier, something unusual had started happening there. The first time Marcus noticed the old man, he almost didn't think anything of it. The man had been standing beside a mailbox, just standing there, watching the road. As Marcus passed, the old man lifted his hand in a polite wave. Marcus had nodded out of habit and kept riding. Just another friendly retiree, he thought. Small towns were full of them. But the next morning, the man was there again. Same place, same time, same quiet wave. Marcus nodded again, then the next morning, and the next. After a few weeks, Marcus realized something strange. The timing was exact. Every single day, 7:15, not 7:10, not 7:20, always 7:15. The old man would be standing by the mailbox wearing a light brown jacket and a faded baseball cap, waiting for the sound of the Harley. At first, Marcus found it a little amusing. Then it became something else, a routine, the kind of small, wordless ritual that slips quietly into a person's life. After a few months, Marcus actually began to expect it. If he was running late, he would glance at his watch and think about the old man standing out there, waiting. And every morning when the Harley's engine echoed down Maplewood Road, the old man would lift his hand. Not a big wave, just a small motion, a greeting. Marcus started raising his hand too, sometimes 2 fingers from the handlebar, sometimes a small nod of the head. They never stopped, never spoke. But for 2 years, they acknowledged each other. The seasons changed around them. Summer brought thick green leaves and the smell of cut grass drifting across the road. In autumn, the trees turned gold and red, and the wind scattered leaves across the pavement as Marcus rode through them. Winter mornings were cold and gray, frost clinging to the mailbox as the old man waved through gloves. Spring returned with soft rain and birds singing in the trees, but the wave never stopped, and neither man truly understood why it had begun. For Walter Dawson, the reason reached far back into another lifetime. Walter was 78 years old. His house sat quietly along Maplewood Road, the same house he had lived in for nearly 40 years. The porch sagged slightly on one corner. The white paint had faded into pale cream, but the place was clean, orderly. Walter believed in keeping things in their place. That habit had come from a long time ago, from the army, from a war most young people now only read about in history books. In 1968, Walter Dawson had been 20 years old and thousands of miles away in a jungle that smelled of rain and smoke. He had not gone there alone. His best friend had been beside him. Danny Reeves. Danny had been the kind of man who laughed easily and believed life would always work itself out somehow. He loved motorcycles, talked about them constantly. During quiet nights in camp, Danny would sit on an ammo crate and describe the motorcycle he planned to buy when the war was over. A long chrome Harley, a cross-country trip, two friends riding from coast to coast. Danny used to grin and say, "We'll ride until we run out of road." Walter had believed him. But in August of that year, Danny never came back from a patrol. The road they had dreamed about ended there. Walter carried that silence with him for decades. Years passed. He married, worked as a mechanic, raised a son. Life moved forward, the way life always does. But the memories remained tucked away somewhere deep inside him. Then one morning 2 years ago, Walter heard the distant roar of a motorcycle coming down Maplewood Road. The sound caught him off guard. For a moment it sounded exactly like the engine Danny had once described, the kind of Harley Danny had dreamed of riding across America. Walter stepped out onto the porch, and when the motorcycle passed his house, something inside him stirred. Without thinking, he raised his hand. The biker nodded. That was all. But the next morning, Walter stepped outside again, waiting, and when he heard the engine in the distance, he smiled. For the first time in many years, something in his day had meaning again. A small moment, a simple wave, but it reminded him that somewhere out there, the road was still moving forward. And for 2 years, every morning, Walter Dawson stood beside that mailbox, waiting for the sound of a Harley, waiting to raise his hand, waiting to greet the rider who had no idea how much that small gesture meant. And then one morning in October, the motorcycle came down Maplewood Road. The engine echoed between the trees. Marcus rode past the familiar house, but this time, no one stood by the mailbox. The porch was empty, the curtains were drawn, and the old man's hand never rose. After that morning, when the old man didn't appear by the mailbox, Marcus Steele Alvarez couldn't shake the feeling gnawing at him. For 2 years, he had relied on that small wave, that quiet ritual. And now, the road felt empty, silent, strange. Marcus rode past the spot where Walter Dawson always stood. The porch was bare, the curtains drawn tight. The familiar white mailbox glinted in the early sunlight, but the hand that always rose was gone. Only the faint rustle of leaves in the October wind broke the silence. The next morning, Marcus returned, hoping it was just a fluke. Maybe Walter had overslept or was running late. But once again, empty. The same bare porch, the same drawn curtains. Nothing. Unease settled into Marcus's chest. Something about this felt wrong. He noticed two neatly stacked newspapers lying on the doorstep, damp with morning dew. It was as if Walter had left them there, but hadn't stepped out. 4 mornings passed like this. Each day, Marcus's concern grew. Now the stack had grown. 4 newspapers leaning against the door. A small lamp left on inside. The house was quiet, but something in the stillness told Marcus he couldn't just ride by anymore. That Friday, Marcus pulled his Harley to a stop. He swung his leg over, boots crunching against the gravel, and walked to the front door. His heart pounded in his chest. He knocked softly at first, then louder when no answer came. The door creaked. Marcus gently pushed it open. The inside smelled of freshly brewed coffee and old wood polish. Everything was neat, orderly, just as Walter always kept it. But the living room rug, there lay Walter Dawson, motionless. Marcus rushed to his side, dropping to his knees. He felt for a pulse, weak but there. Relief washed over him. "Sir, can you hear me?" Marcus whispered, his voice calm but edged with urgency. Walter coughed, blinking slowly. His eyes, clouded but alive, fixed on Marcus. For a moment, neither spoke. Then, with a raspy voice, Marcus muttered, "You missed your wave." It was the beginning of their first real conversation in 2 years. Walter shared memories of Vietnam, of his best friend Danny Reeves, and of the promise they'd made to ride across America together one day. A dream left unfulfilled when Danny never returned. Marcus listened quietly, nodding. He didn't interrupt. Every word, every pause felt sacred. For Walter, the sound of a Harley passing his home had become a reminder that someone, somewhere remembered him. And now Marcus realized that the small ritual, the daily wave, had been more than a friendly gesture. It had been a lifeline. In the following days, Marcus visited Walter at the hospital. They laughed softly at the little things, talked about bikes, the town, and the long roads they both loved. But the quiet wave, the ritual, remained the anchor. Finally, Marcus said one morning, "Let's take you back home. To Maplewood. You need to see something." Walter, still frail but with eyes brightening, agreed. The drive back was slow, careful, along the familiar stretch of road that had shaped their silent routine. When Walter's house came into view, he froze. His porch, his mailbox, were surrounded by dozens of motorcycles lined neatly along the roadside. Riders in leather vests, helmets in hand, waited patiently. Some held flags, some adjusted their gloves, but each exuded respect and quiet strength. Marcus removed his helmet. "You said you missed your wave," he said. "Well, sir, now you'll never be alone again." Walter hesitated for a moment, then slipped into the leather vest Marcus handed him. Across the back, stitched in bold letters, "Brotherhood never retires." He stepped onto the porch. One by one, the riders lifted their hands in salute as they passed by, forming a silent corridor of honor. Every wave, every nod, a message of connection, respect, and recognition. For Walter, it was overwhelming. The quiet ritual of 2 years had grown into something unimaginable, a display of solidarity and brotherhood he never expected to see. And when the last rider passed, he stood there breathing slowly, a gentle smile forming on his lips. That morning on Maplewood Road, the hand that had once risen alone now stood among hundreds. Walter Dawson was not alone. And Marcus, watching from his Harley, knew this. Sometimes the smallest gestures carry the greatest power. The morning after Marcus brought Walter home from the hospital, the small town of Maplewood seemed to hum with an unspoken anticipation. Marcus didn't know exactly how to explain what he was about to do, even to himself. It started as a simple thought. Walter shouldn't have to be alone ever again. But by the time he walked into the Iron Riders clubhouse, that thought had grown into something much larger. The clubhouse sat on the outskirts of town, a low brick building with faded black and gold banners hanging on the walls. The sound of engines from the garage outside mingled with the smell of motor oil and coffee. It was a place of camaraderie, of silent loyalty, of unspoken rules. Marcus pushed the door open, and the familiar faces of his brothers turned toward him. "Steele," said Robbie, one of the senior riders. "You look serious. What's up?" Marcus cleared his throat. "It's Walter Dawson. You know, the old guy by Maplewood Road. The one who waves every morning." A murmur ran through the room. Some riders nodded. Most knew of Walter, the quiet veteran whose small wave had become a local legend among those who rode past Maplewood Road. "Yeah," said Carson, the club's vice president. "What about him?" Marcus leaned on the table, his voice low but firm. He almost didn't make it. I found him at home lying on the rug. He's okay now, but I can't let him be alone. Not anymore. I want to do something for him." The room went quiet. Then slowly one rider spoke up. "Like what?" Marcus smiled a little nervously. "I think we bring the road to him, a proper ride, show him he's part of a brotherhood, that he's never alone." The club erupted, not in shouts, but in the quiet nods and murmurs of agreement that only bikers understand. Some slapped their knees, others reached for their helmets. It began with just a few of them making calls, sending messages. "Maplewood Road, tomorrow morning, Walter Dawson." The next day, a dozen Iron Riders lined up in the garage, engines idling, lights blinking. Each rider checked his bike, tightened straps on his gear, and whispered a quiet word to himself. Marcus looked at them. "Keep it clean, respect, silent. This isn't about showing off. It's about him. That's all." The riders nodded. There would be no noise beyond the engines, no stunts, no unnecessary revving, just a road full of respect. By late afternoon, messages had gone out to allied clubs across 3 states. Riders who had never met Walter were now hearing the story, a quiet veteran, waving to the same biker every morning for 2 years, nearly lost to his own solitude. "Steal," said one of the younger riders. "How many do you think will show up?" Marcus shrugged. "I don't know, doesn't matter. Every single one of us that can ride, that's all that matters." The night before the ride, the town of Maplewood was unusually quiet. Marcus lay awake in his small apartment, listening to the faint hum of distant motorcycles on the highway. He thought about Walter, about those 2 years of daily waves, about Vietnam, about Danny Reeves, about the life that had been so quiet, so routine, and yet so profoundly lonely. Somewhere in the dark, Marcus smiled. The old man didn't know it yet, but tomorrow morning, the road would remind him of something he hadn't felt in decades, that he mattered, that he was remembered, that he was part of a family larger than he ever imagined. Morning came early. Mist clung to the fields along Maplewood Road, turning the trees into ghostly silhouettes. Riders began to arrive from neighboring towns, their engines sounding like a soft rumble at first, growing steadily as more and more bikes joined the line. Marcus, on his Harley at the head, glanced at the small house across the way. Walter's curtains were still drawn. The porch was quiet, but Marcus knew the old man would come. He always did. He looked back at the growing line of motorcycles stretching down the road. Dozens, then scores, then more than 100. Each rider had come because they had heard the story. Each rider had come because they understood what it meant to be part of something bigger than themselves. And as the sun began to rise, turning the mist into gold, Marcus signaled the riders. Engines revved softly in unison, a thunderous but respectful heartbeat echoing down Maplewood Road. It wasn't about noise. It wasn't about speed. It was about presence. It was about honor. From the quiet porch, a small shadow appeared. Walter Dawson. He wore his brown jacket and faded cap, looking puzzled. Then his hand lifted slowly, instinctively, and Marcus saw it. That familiar wave. And for the first time in years, Marcus realized that the wave was more than a gesture. It was a lifeline. But this morning, it would not be just one biker returning it. It would be the road itself, alive with the sound of engines, the glint of chrome, and the quiet power of a brotherhood that spanned miles, decades, and hearts. The morning air smelled faintly of dew and diesel. Maplewood Road had never seemed so alive. Marcus Steele Alvarez led the growing line of iron riders and allied bikers, their engines humming in a low, respectful roar. Each rider approached quietly, keeping formation, a rolling testament to discipline and brotherhood. No one spoke. No one raced ahead. The only sound was the collective heartbeat of hundreds of motorcycles, a rhythm that grew louder with every mile. Marcus glanced at the house perched along the road. Walter Dawson's home. The porch was still empty. The blinds were drawn. And yet Marcus knew. He had ridden this stretch enough mornings to trust his instincts. Walter would be out soon. One by one, motorcycles appeared from side streets, from highways, from towns that Marcus hadn't even realized were connected to Maplewood. Riders Marcus had never met, from clubs he didn't belong to, had responded to the call. Each had been told the same story. An old veteran, 2 years of quiet waves, nearly lost to his own solitude, waiting unknowingly for something more than a greeting. The line stretched farther than Marcus could see. The mist hung low over the fields, swirling in the golden light of early sun, making the long parade of motorcycles look almost ethereal. Chrome glinted. Leather jackets gleamed. Patches and emblems flashed in the light. Iron riders, steel wolves, freedom sons, and dozens more. All had come for one reason: respect. As Marcus rode slowly, he caught a glimpse of Walter on the porch. The old man's eyes were wide, uncertain. His hand instinctively rose, as if he had known all along someone would come. But when he saw the line of motorcycles stretching down the road, he froze. The sound of engines grew louder, a collective rumble that filled the valley. Birds took flight from the trees, startled by the approaching thunder. But Marcus knew this wasn't fear. It was awe. Walter Dawson was about to witness something he could never have imagined. The riders began to form two parallel lines on either side of the road, creating a corridor of honor. Marcus slowed his bike to a crawl and signaled for the others to do the same. Hundreds of hands rose in silent salute, a wave of respect moving like a tide down the street. Each rider's gaze was steady, each motion deliberate. Walter stepped off the porch, holding onto the railing for balance. His legs trembled slightly, but he managed to stand upright, facing the motorcycles. He looked around in disbelief, his breath catching. His eyes were misty, reflecting the sunlight glinting off polished chrome and leather. Marcus rode up alongside him, leaning slightly from his Harley. "You missed your wave, so we brought the road to you," he said quietly. Walter could barely speak. He raised both hands slowly, unsure whether to wave, to salute, or simply to acknowledge the impossible sight before him. Marcus nodded at him, smiling. Then he gestured to the riders. And just like that, hundreds of hands rose in unison. Every biker, every vest, every patch. A salute for one man, a symbol that he mattered, that he was remembered, that he was never alone. The sound was deafening yet controlled, a rolling symphony of engines and respect. It wasn't about showmanship. It wasn't about pride. It was about humanity, about connection, about a simple promise kept through miles, decades, and lives intertwined by loyalty. Walter's lips quivered. He stepped fully onto the road, letting go of the railing. Marcus handed him a black leather vest, softer and lighter than Walter expected. Across the back were stitched bold letters, "Brotherhood never retires." He hesitated, then slowly he put it on. The weight was comforting, grounding him in the moment. The riders, seeing him in the vest, lowered their engines slightly, creating a soft, rhythmic hum, a heartbeat for the old veteran. Walter Dawson stood there at the center of it all, his hand lifted, catching the waves of hundreds of bikers passing by. The old man, who had spent decades quietly waving to one rider each morning, was now embraced by an entire brotherhood. And in that moment, he realized something profound. His small daily gesture had rippled outward, touching more lives than he could ever have imagined. Marcus pulled his Harley to a stop beside Walter. "They came because of you," he said softly. "Because someone remembered. Because you reminded us all what it means to care." Walter blinked through the tears that had begun to gather. He raised both hands and let the riders pass. Some tipped their helmets, some nodded. Each motion, deliberate and sincere, reaffirmed the promise Marcus had made silently that morning. No one gets left behind. Not today, not ever. And as the last riders rolled down Maplewood Road, leaving a trail of rumbling echoes in the crisp morning air, Walter Dawson stood tall, a smile breaking across his face for the first time in decades. He wasn't alone, and neither, Marcus realized, would he ever be. The sun had fully risen, casting a warm golden glow across Maplewood Road. Mist had lifted, revealing the long stretch of asphalt lined on both sides with motorcycles. Hundreds of riders, leather-clad and resolute, waited silently. Marcus Steele Alvarez guided Walter Dawson to the center of the road. The old man's hands trembled slightly, but his eyes held something that had been missing for years: awe, recognition, and an overwhelming sense of belonging. Marcus stepped back, letting the formation take shape. Slowly, methodically, the riders adjusted, creating a perfect corridor stretching from the edge of town to the old Dawson house. The sound of engines was subdued, a respectful hum, like a heartbeat echoing across the valley. Walter's breath caught. He could hardly comprehend what he was seeing. The line of motorcycles seemed endless, each rider raising a hand in silent salute, as if the entire road itself was alive with honor and memory. Marcus rode past him, giving a small nod. "This is for you, sir. Every wave you ever gave, every morning, for 2 years. Nobody's left alone anymore." The old man's lips quivered. Memories of Danny Reeves, of Vietnam, of decades of quiet mornings by the mailbox, all surged at once. He lifted his hand instinctively, mirroring the gesture that had started it all. And then it happened. One by one, hundreds of hands rose in reply. A wave that stretched down Maplewood Road like a living river of chrome and leather. Each motion deliberate, each salute a pledge of respect, a promise kept. Walter stood still, letting the moment wash over him. Tears streaked his weathered face. He realized that this wasn't just a group of bikers honoring him. It was every life he had touched unknowingly. Every small gesture that had rippled outward returned to him tenfold in the form of this extraordinary brotherhood. The corridor of bikes moved slowly, engines harmonizing in a gentle crescendo. Birds flew from the trees, startled at first, then circling above as if acknowledging the moment. Sunlight glinted off helmets, reflected in the polished chrome of motorcycles, catching on patches and emblems. Iron Riders, Steel Wolves, Freedom Sons, clubs from 3 states, all united by one simple truth: respect and humanity transcend age, time, and distance. Marcus stayed beside Walter, his own helmet off, watching as the old man absorbed the scene. "You see, sir," Marcus said softly, "it's not just about the wave. It's about remembering, about showing up, about being there when it matters most." Walter nodded slowly, a shaky hand gripping the edge of his leather vest. Across the back, stitched in bold letters, "Brotherhood never retires." He drew a deep breath and lifted his hand again, letting the riders pass. Each salute, each nod, each slight tilt of a helmet carried with it unspoken words. "You matter. You are remembered. You are part of this family." Marcus could feel the emotion rolling down the line. This wasn't showmanship. This wasn't bravado. This was human connection made tangible. A demonstration of how a simple gesture, one small wave, can create something profoundly meaningful. Walter Dawson, who had once waved at a single biker each morning, now stood at the center of hundreds. And in that moment, the old veteran understood something deeper than he ever had. Life is measured not by the battles you fight alone, but by the people who remember you, who ride for you, who honor you simply because you exist. The last riders slowly passed, forming a silent retreat down the road. Engines faded into the distance, leaving behind only the echo of respect and the soft whisper of tires on asphalt. Walter remained on the road, standing tall, a gentle smile breaking across his face. Marcus placed a reassuring hand on his shoulder. "They came for you, sir, and they'll always be there, in one way or another." Walter's eyes shimmered. I never imagined this." Marcus shook his head. "Neither did I. But sometimes the road has a way of bringing people together, of reminding us that even the smallest gestures can carry the biggest weight." Walter Dawson looked around one last time, the corridor of honor now gone, leaving only the morning light and the quiet hum of memories. He raised his hand once more, a final salute to the brothers who had ridden for him, for a man they had never met, for the simple truth that no one faces the road of life alone. And for Marcus, watching from his Harley, the lesson was clear. Every wave, every gesture, every moment of care matters. It creates ripples that travel farther than you could ever imagine. And in the end, those ripples bring us together in ways that words alone could never achieve. Walter smiled, a full, unguarded smile, feeling the weight of decades lift from his shoulders. He was home, and he was no longer alone. The roar of engines had faded into memory, leaving Maplewood Road quiet once more. The mist had lifted entirely, and sunlight warmed the fields and trees along the stretch of asphalt where Walter Dawson had just experienced something he never imagined possible. Walter stood on his porch again, the leather vest snug across his shoulders, the words "Brotherhood never retires" bold and bright. He let the morning sun wash over him, closing his eyes and breathing deeply. For the first time in decades, he felt truly seen, truly remembered. Marcus Steele Alvarez parked his Harley at the edge of the road and approached slowly. He didn't need to speak. Walter's eyes said it all. Still, Marcus offered a small smile. "They're gone now," he said softly, "but they'll be back. Not for show, not for photos, just because they remember, just because they care." Walter nodded. His eyes misted again, but this time with gratitude rather than sorrow. I never thought a simple wave could mean this much," he admitted, his voice trembling. "Every morning I thought, just waving would be enough to mark the day, to feel alive. But this?" He gestured vaguely toward the now empty road. "This is beyond anything I could have imagined." Marcus crouched slightly to meet his gaze. "Sometimes the smallest acts grow into something far bigger." You waving, it reminded someone that they're not alone. And then others. And soon, it became something we all share. The two men stood in silence for a moment, the calm only broken by the occasional chirp of a bird or the rustle of a light October breeze through the trees. The town around them was slowly coming to life. A neighbor peeked through a window, blinking at the empty road, then stepped outside, curious. "Walter," she called, her voice gentle. "I saw the motorcycles this morning. Hundreds of them. Is everything okay?" Walter lifted a hand in acknowledgement, then smiled. "Everything's better than okay," he said. "I wasn't alone. Not today. Not ever." The neighbor nodded, clearly touched. She glanced at Marcus, who tipped his helmet slightly. "Thank you," she said simply, understanding that this wasn't about the flash of engines or a spectacle. It was about respect, loyalty, and humanity. Walter and Marcus moved slowly back inside the house, the leather vest still a comforting weight on Walter's shoulders. They brewed coffee, talking quietly about motorcycles, Vietnam, Danny Reeves, and the memories that shaped a lifetime. The conversation flowed easily, as if decades of routine had finally opened a door to connection that had been waiting all along. Over the next few days, Maplewood Road changed subtly. People whispered to one another about the extraordinary display they had witnessed. Not the spectacle of hundreds of motorcycles, but the story behind it. The quiet ritual of a wave, a veteran remembered, a community of bikers rising to honor a simple human act. Walter continued to wave each morning, but now it was different. He knew the wave carried more than a greeting. It carried history, camaraderie, and respect. And Marcus, riding past, would always return it, smiling at the understanding that some gestures, no matter how small, can ripple outward in ways that touch lives far beyond what anyone could imagine. One morning, Walter stepped onto the porch and looked down the road. Marcus's Harley appeared in the distance, engines humming softly. Walter lifted his hand, steady and strong. Marcus waved back. "It's still us," Marcus said quietly as he rode past. "The same ritual, the same connection." Walter smiled. "Yes," he said, "but now I'm part of something bigger, something I never thought I'd see in my lifetime." And he was. Every day, hundreds of bikers carry that same spirit with them, quiet, disciplined, loyal. They didn't ride for fame or recognition. They rode because it mattered, because someone mattered. Marcus realized then that life's true victories aren't measured in speed or distance, but in the lives we touch, the connections we make, the respect we give and receive. Walter, once a solitary figure waving at the road each morning, had become the symbol of something far greater, a living reminder that no one, no matter their age, their past, or their solitude, should ever be left alone. And as the sun climbed higher over Maplewood Road, the two men stood quietly, listening to the wind rustle through the trees. The road ahead stretched long and open, full of possibility, full of connection. Marcus adjusted his helmet and revved the engine lightly. Walter waved once more, and the echo of that small, enduring gesture lingered, an invisible thread linking hearts, across time, across miles, across generations. Sometimes, Marcus thought, it isn't the road you ride that matters most. It's the people you ride for. And on Maplewood Road, that lesson would never be forgotten. The roar of motorcycles filled the crisp morning air, a sound Walter had not realized he'd missed until now. One by one, they appeared on Maplewood Road, engines rumbling like a heartbeat that had returned to life. The sun was just rising, casting long golden streaks across the quiet town, illuminating the chrome and leather of the assembled riders. Walter stood frozen by his mailbox, the leather vest Marcus had handed him still snug around his shoulders. The patch on the back read, "Brotherhood never retires." It was more than a phrase, it was a promise, one that hundreds of bikers had quietly honored. Marcus came to Walter's side, the familiar scent of leather and gasoline surrounding him. "You thought you were alone," he said gently, "but no one from this road, or this brotherhood, ever really is." Then the bikers began to ride past slowly, in perfect formation, each one lifting a hand in a salute. A wave that mirrored the one Walter had given every morning for 2 years. The scene stretched on, dozens of riders forming a silent river of respect and warmth. For Walter, the world had contracted to this moment, this feeling of being seen, remembered, and honored. Tears pricked his eyes, though he didn't try to wipe them away. He raised his own hand, a thin, trembling wave that matched theirs. And for the first time in years, Walter felt the weight on his chest lift. He wasn't just an old man waving at a passing biker. He was part of something bigger, a living, breathing testament to loyalty, respect, and the quiet heroism of human connection. Marcus leaned closer and whispered, "This is what it means, Walter. This is what it means to be remembered, to belong." Walter nodded, a small, grateful smile breaking across his weathered face. Around him, the motorcycles continued down the road, their engines fading into the distance, leaving a silence that now felt full rather than empty. The moral was clear, and it didn't need to be spoken aloud. True brotherhood transcends age, fear, and distance. Acts of loyalty, however small, echo far beyond what we can see. No one truly stands alone. Walter returned to his porch that morning, the vest still on, the mailbox bathed in the golden light. He watched the road, no longer with longing, but with quiet pride and peace. The wave would continue tomorrow and the next day, and he knew now that each wave carried with it the invisible strength of hundreds of hands, hundreds of hearts united. And in that moment, Walter Dawson understood something he had forgotten over decades. Life was not about the number of days left. It was about the connections we make, the promises we keep, and the brotherhoods we never walk away from. A single leaf drifted down from the maple tree above, landing gently on the mailbox. Walter picked it up, letting it rest in his palm as he looked down the road, already imagining the next morning. Marcus's Harley growled softly in the distance, a reminder that even after this day, the bond would remain, silent but unbreakable. For Walter, that morning on Maplewood Road was more than a wave. It was a return to hope, to friendship, and to a brotherhood that had never left him. Not really. And as the sun rose higher, it shone not just on the road, but on the promise that no one ever truly rides alone.